I think first time I saw it, it was on IFC, but yeah.
Oh, you youngins.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I do. I did. I mean, my dad did run a video store when I was a kid, and he had like VHSs everywhere. So
oh my gosh, I feel like that's something we got to dig into during this episode of Class of '95 because we are live, and yeah, it's the second week in which we're diving into a comedy that came out the year I graduated high school. Now, Mallrats is not exactly a high school comedy because I think a lot of these people are in college. One girl is definitely in high school, and that becomes a major plot point.
Yes.
We're gonna and you know we're gonna go to some uncomfortable places here on this show, but yeah,
Not in the back of Volkswagen.
my goodness. Well, so we are Earth's Mightiest Critics. I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Mike Crowley of You'll Probably Agree. We have Katie Glidewell, the blonde in front, hanging out talking about this film. Now, Katie, last week we talked about Clueless, and like with that movie, I watched Mallrats last night, with my wife, and I don't know what it was about the 90s. We kind of talked about this with Clueless last night, the very liberal use of the R word. And I counted three in Mallrats.
yeah.
Three, yeah, it's like 3 or 4. I think you're right. I think it's 3. Shannon Doherty says it at least twice, if not 3 times. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just goes to show that the times have definitely changed.
Yeah. Well, it's like Bill and Ted. They said the F word and not the one that rhymes with duck.
Yes. Yeah, that was even earlier than this one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I find that kind of language, I don't personally have a problem with it. It does sound a bit different now that I'm, older and I think wiser. It's definitely it's of its time kind of a mentality. But yeah, and I definitely don't feel comfortable using those words, certainly. But, art is art. And it's strange to talk about Mallrats in terms of being art, because this was the big Universal Pictures focus Gramercy follow-up to Kevin Smith's very independent movie Clerks. So this was 1995. Clerks was 94, I think. And so you've got, an indie sensation, one of those seminal movies that, much like, Tarantino or Rodriguez, Kevin Smith helped define an entire generation of filmmakers throughout the late 90s and into the 2000s. And he continues to have, a career today, definitely making different kinds of movies. He did make Clerks 3 a couple of years ago, and each of those films kind of evolves the characters and shows how they mature or don't as they go through their lives. Mallrats, they never made a sequel to this, although I think at one point there was a comic book, or there was going to be a comic book kind of sequel. And Suzanne, the monkey or the orangutan that we see at the end credits, that was turned into a comic book story years later. Mallrats is a very strange film, is what I'm getting at. So before we get into it, I want to ask both of you, Mike, let's lead off with you, because you already said you saw it in IFC for the first time.
Yeah.
When was that? How old were you? And what had your exposure to Kevin Smith been? Was this it, or had you seen Clerks first or some of the other movies?
I think this was like in 2004, and I didn't know anything about Clerks or Kevin Smith, and I kind of somehow found out about it. I ran into it on TV, and I'm like, oh, this comic's hilarious. And then I got the DVD, and I loved it. And everything that was charming about Clerks is missing in Mallrats. And at the time when I saw Mallrats, it didn't really leave an impression on me. I didn't think much about it. And I think it's because like Clerks has this like its budget is sort of its charm. The fact that it's just like this fly on the wall, black and white camera filming on like, super 16 millimeter film, or it might have been just 16 millimeter at that point. And you're just kind of got to have this mumblecore thing where these guys are talking about pop culture and all that. And it's funny because it's well timed. Where in Mallrats, it tries to be a little more conventional in its camera work, but you can really tell that Kevin Smith is a director that doesn't know how to really operate the camera and everything, because the movie's under budget. It's really underlit. It looks bad. The editing on a lot of the scenes is just horrendous. Like they just hold the camera on someone where it's like a sitcom where you're waiting for the laugh, but there's like no real laugh coming. the characters, I mean, when I rewatched it, they're they're kind of atrocious, you know. I didn't want Claire Forlani to, you know, reunite with Jason Lee at the end of the film because
Jeremy London.
I'm sorry, Jeremy London. Yeah, I meant to say Jeremy London. And then I didn't want Shannon Doherty to reunite with Jason Lee because, you know, Jason Lee was just kind of this insufferable jerk throughout the movie.
AKA my hero back in 1995, sir.
Yeah, but I mean, as his character, he wasn't great. So, yeah, it
No,
was
I'm talking about the character specifically. No, go ahead.
yeah, but yeah, the movie was just kind of a mess. It really, a lot of critics at the time compared it to Clerks, and you can see why, because Clerks is kind of, it feels almost like an accident how funny that movie was and how well it worked. Although I think Kevin Smith has made some other movies that I like, but this was not one of them.
So, do you still not like it? Is it still kind of lower tier? Do you have any kind of fondness for it?
For Mallrats,
Yeah.
no. I rewatched it, and that it reminded me of all the things I pointed out why I didn't like it. You know, I just didn't like the main. I didn't like the main character. I thought the comedic timing was terrible, and though I guess the Stan Lee cameo was pretty nice. But yeah, I mean the rest of it, it's just it's like the director of Clerks wanted to write another Clerks-like movie, but he didn't know how to handle the lowbrow humor the way he did in that film, and yeah, not good.
All right. Okay. Now we'll come back to that perspective because I disagree and I also 100% agree. Mallrats is a very conflicting movie for me. But Katie, you've got the VHS, which it's sitting like on the table in front of you, so it looks almost like you've got a Mallrats poster. It's like that weird perspective thing. I love that. So tell us about Mallrats.
Mallrats, I do not recall seeing this in the theater when it came out. I think I missed it due to critics' reviews because, yeah, it was very, very skewered when it came out. And then looking at the budget, I mean, the budget is like $8 million, which for that time, actually, I think is really high considering I think one of the biggest people they would have to pay would be Shannon Doherty, Stan Lee, and not even Michael Rooker, I think would have been that much because no one knew who Ben Affleck was. And no one knew who the rest of the people were. I totally forgot that two of the guys that are in like the New Jersey comic book store that they have the show on are the two guys that are in line for Stan Lee. Wow, have they changed? I did not. I was like, holy shit. Is that the guy with the giant gray beard now? It's like, oh my God.
Brian Johnson, yeah.
Baby, like that freaked me out. Like, and I'm watching this on VHS. I watched this right before did a rewatch before we came on. You know, I can't remember when. I know I saw it before I met Shannon Doherty and actually took some pictures with her. And she was like, wow, I can't believe you have the VHS. I'm like, yes. She's like, hold on to that. And she was just lovely talking to her about the film and how she had so much fun doing it. And it's also funny watching the movie. She has 5 different wardrobe changes in not even a 24-hour time. Like, I don't understand why she changes her outfit 4 times at the mall. 4 times.
We picked up on that watching it, at home last night too. And it's something that I don't think it had registered with me either, partially because at the end of the film, she ends up kind of wearing something similar to what she had like earlier on. So it almost comes full circle. You don't quite pick up on it, but yeah, it's very conspicuous during other points.
Yeah, because I'm watching it and I was like, wow, I did not remember her changing this many times, like having this many outfits, which is kind of like so random and weird. It's also crazy that I remember seeing this film, like it had to have been like on cable or something like that. I didn't know until 15 years later that Claire Forlani is English. Like, had no idea. Because it's like she did this, she did Meet Joe Black, she did a few other films where she's like all American, and then she's like, oh, look at her doing an English accent. No, she is an English citizen. She is from the Isle. She's across the pond. I'm like, wow, that is crazy. Love Stan Lee in this movie. Damn, he would be what I think people would call a zaddy right now. Like,
That's
you know,
what that I'm
a
not
daddy, like he's a hot daddy. He like, you know, this is 30 years ago, so he would have been like 60 or something. Like, he looks good. He looks real good in this movie. Jason Lee is insufferable, but I mean, welcome to the 90s. I don't know, there aren't really many movies or roles that he is in where he isn't insufferable. Michael Rooker, always fun seeing him. And it's just a film with two guys who talk a lot and speak a lot in thesaurus words about being broken up, instead of trying to actually have a like adult conversation with their significant others. They decide to go to the mall, and their significant others basically come to them and they realize, you know, let's make this work, and I'm going to fight whoever, you know, even though they may be in the wrong of why they've broken up in the first place. Is it different than Clerks? Yeah, so much different. I mean, the budget isn't even close. Like, what? That was made for under $1 million, maybe 300,000. And then to have this
on
for
credit cards,
800,000 with like so many different plot points and stuff like that. You've got Jay and Silent Bob. You've got William with the schooner / sailboat thing. I mean, so many things. And then the instance with Pamela Barnes and the third nipple, you know, and I remember seeing her. It's like, oh, that's the chick from that did the replacement of the replacement, I think, of Chrissy from
Three's Company.
Three's Company. And then when it's like, and there's her third nipple. Okay, so I've grown up a lot watching this film. This is me just kissing my youth goodbye now. Okay.
Well,
I didn't think it was horrible.
Well, I just want to pull over because you said a lot that I want to dig into. But that third nipple, at one point, our two heroes, TS and Brodie, they get kicked out of the mall by Michael Rooker's character, who is the father of TS's ex-girlfriend. He's trying to produce this game show in the mall, and he doesn't want the loser ex-boyfriend and his, you know, reprobate friend hanging around to cause mischief. So he has them kicked out. They go to what's called the Dirt Mall, which is like this flea market, a massive flea market on the wrong side of town. And they decide to go get psychic advice from a topless psychic. And it's Priscilla Barnes. She takes off her top. Then there's a third nipple there. Now, what I loved about this, it's a double whammy of a tag at the end, because the two guys leave and she pops off one of the nipples. That's one thing. And then she pops it in her mouth, and that's the end. And it goes, it's one of those like, what? But by then we're back at the mall, and the guys have gotten up the gumption to go and fight for their ladies. This movie has a lot of that weird stuff. And, you know, with Jay and Silent Bob, you know, they were the kind of the guys who hung outside the store in Clerks. They got into kind of trouble, but it was very low key trouble, you know, selling drugs and, you know, just saying ridiculous stuff and doing a lot of dancing to the boombox. I almost said jukebox, but here it's like the budget, finally they're playing with the Universal money. So Silent Bob's running around in a Batman costume with the grappling hook, and they're doing all these elaborate stunts to try and bring down the game show. It's just, it felt like an attempt to make them into something that they kind of inherently weren't. And that's one of the reasons that when we get to Chasing Amy, which is almost like I learned my lesson, said Kevin Smith. I'm going back to do more personal, independent movies. Jay and Silent Bob are back to, hey, they're going to show up once in a small scene, kind of impart some wisdom in another conversation in which a character has to very rapidly mature and realize he's been a bonehead. and that's where they belong, right? It's the same kind of thing with Zack and Miri Make a Porno, which came out many years later. That movie flopped, and all of a sudden Kevin Smith's like, okay, now I'm going to go make all these kind of weird artsy movies and also bizarre, expansions on my kind of toilet humor. I don't think I've liked a movie he's done since Zack and Miri Make a Porno. And that includes Clerks 3. I hated Clerks 3,
I did not like Clerks 3. I love Zack and Miri Make a Porno. I have that. It's on VHS. I have it on DVD. But yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of the pinnacle of him having a slightly higher budget, because I think he sold it as, hey, this is going to be my version of a Judd Apatow movie. So it's going to be kind of artsy, but also broadly comedic in its same way. And it just didn't connect with people. But that had more over the top antics, like, hey, we're going to shoot this X-rated version of Star Wars. There's all these kinds of antics. But then also you've got the very real grounded stuff of like, oh, we meet these characters. They're barely they can't keep the heat on in their apartment. And there's also this kind of will they, won't they tension that I think is resolved during a lovely scene with Elizabeth Banks and Seth Rogen, where he's kind of going downtown, if you know what I mean. And like, that's one of it's hot and romantic at the same time. That's Kevin Smith's, no pun intended, sweet spot. And all of that is missing kind of in Mallrats, to take it back to the film we're discussing.
Yeah.
I never realized until I was like really thinking about it with the Universal and the Jaws, like having the characters T.S. Quint, like Quint and Brodie. I never realized it until watching it this time. I'm like, oh, see, I wonder who would have been the Hooper then, since they had the Quint and the Brodie in this, and they didn't have a Hooper. So I wonder who Hooper would have been in Mallrats, if he actually, or if that was just a pressure from like for Universal to flip the bill. It's like, okay, you have to show Jaws and then name 2 of your characters after that, and we'll see if anyone gets it.
I don't know. I feel like Kevin Smith being Kevin Smith, and watching a lot of his movies, it's very pop culture and jokey. I feel like he named these characters that maybe he found out he was going to be working for Universal, so that was kind of like his homage to the big boys, and they're like, oh, cool, you want the shark too? The weird thing of many weird things in this movie is there is a 35-40 minute prologue that is on the extended cut, which you can find on the Blu-ray. I have not watched it in years because it is genuinely terrible. And I think one of the reasons they cut it out, if you listen to the commentary, was that version, like there's an allusion to a disaster at a governor's ball earlier on. One of the execs says, if this is going to be like that governor's ball thing, you can forget it. That was the whole setup. And one of the reasons they axed it is because Kevin Smith realized, either on his own or as a note from the studio, they said, you've got a movie called Mallrats. We don't get to the shopping mall for an hour of what is going to be a 2-hour movie. So that's why it's an hour and a half. They cut out this whole prologue of it also, there are holes in the movie and kind of references, and even Brodie's character's name is Brodie Bruce. That's his full name. We don't know that except when we find out in a line from Ben Affleck's character, which in the film sounds like it's the actor making a mistake, because when he's confronting Brodie in the hallway and beating him up, he says, Bruce. I'm like, no, his name's Brodie. But you don't know that unless you know the behind the scenes stuff. It feels like a flub that didn't get edited out. The movie's a mess. I don't recommend watching the extended version, except as kind of like if you're a history buff or you're a completist. It's fascinating but not funny. It's even worse, I think, than the material that made it into the final theatrical cut. But like I said, I have a very special place in my heart for Mallrats. I was a huge fan of Clerks. Like, it rocked my world in ways that aside from, again, Tarantino, Rodriguez, I didn't even know movies could be that. And like you, Katie, I think I missed it in the theater because it came out, it had no buzz, it had no business, and so it was gone. And so I caught it on VHS. A number of my friends in high school, they kind of made fun of me because they're like quoting Mallrats and stuff to me. They had gotten to see it. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It sounds awesome. And they're like, it is, but it's also kind of terrible. So when I finally got to see it, I found out what a stink palm was.
Yeah.
I got note, a very uncomfortable place, all that good stuff. So for as many little pop cultural touchstones as there are in this movie, you kind of have to wade through a lot of stuff that isn't that great, especially the mouthfuls, the pages of dialogue these characters are spitting back and forth at each other. It sounds so unnatural that I can feel like
Yes.
I can see this on the page. I don't even think it would work on the page, let alone coming out of like Shannon Doherty's mouth.
Yeah, it's sort of conflicting like categories, because you got the mumblecore where everyone's kind of, because that was like a big thing in the 90s. Everyone liked to talk a lot in monologues. Like if you see like Tarantino's movies, like you pointed out, there's a lot of talking and a lot of cool dialogue where, Kevin Smith is like potty humor, but it's clever if you when he does it right. He's got that, and then he mixes it with slapstick. And when he tries to put them together, it feels like two movies conflicting with each other. And I think that's what doesn't quite make it work. Like a lot of, like, you have the scenes where Silent Bob is trying to, I think, set the stage on fire, and the kid like puts the little toy car out and he slips on it. And then
it was the sock with the quarters. He was trying
to
the
sock with the
security
quarters.
guard.
Yeah, he's trying to knock out the security guard. And the timing of that sequence doesn't work either, because Kevin Smith's talent is dialogue, and I think he was trying to go for something that a broader audience would like, instead of just doing the same thing again. Although it kind of does that simultaneously, and it feels like he just rushed the movie out the door because of his success.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting if, because you could almost do Clerks again, but in a mall, and kind of show maybe different stores, different characters having their own kind of drama, and cutting away, almost like a Robert Altman type of thing. But there's almost this feeling like, oh, I'm doing a big wide release movie. I have to amp up all the stakes and the stunts and the hijinks and the nudity and all this other stuff, because there's this expectation. But for the fans that kind of put him on the map, it's unrecognizable from the thing that made him famous, which I think is another reason, if I had to be an armchair psychologist for him, I'd say that's probably why he went back to doing something more personal with Chasing Amy. Because I mean, in that movie, it opens with a comic book convention, which is very clearly a budget comic book convention, because there's like 3 tables and everything's very tightly shot, and it doesn't look like any con you've ever been to. But whereas this movie, you're shooting inside a shopping mall, and you've got fake signs and everything, even though a lot of the signs look very cheap. There's a great gag. Rug Munchers, which is a carpet store. Like, what are you doing, Kevin? This is all your worst instincts coming out to the fore. But Katie, you were going to say something. I think I cut you off, so sorry.
You can't remember what it was. Oh, was it during the? Hold on. It was during the stink-palmin. I was like when I was watching it, and Brodie like shakes Stanley's hand after he's done, and we just went through that whole sequence of the stink-palmin and the whole thing with the pretzels being eaten and all that stuff. And they do go to the outlet mall, which I thought was very judgmental from Jeremy London's character, that he looks so beneath, like, no person who actually had self-respect would come here. I'm like, oh my God, is this seriously what the feeling was in 1995, sir? Really? Like, you're driving your mom's station wagon. Like, who are you to judge anyone? But then when you see Brodie like talking to Stan Lee and he shakes his hand, all I could think of was like, that is the same hand that was down your ass that we just had this whole sequence that you can't get that smell off of your hand, and you just shook the hand of your idol with that stink-palmin. And it's like, ew.
I didn't even catch that, and I've seen this movie like a dozen times. I didn't pick up on that at all. Wow. I wonder if there should be a post-credit scene where Stan Lee is getting into his car and he's like, I feel queasy, young true believer.
Or something like, what is that smell? Yeah.
But yeah, the thing about that mall, and the dirt mall, I completely agree with you, Katie. He does have this contempt for his surroundings. It is really cheeky and kind of gross to me that at one point he picks up a hat and he puts it on and is like, "It says Clerks. It's a Clerks hat. Get it?
Yeah.
Because I made this movie." I'm like, "Yeah, I get it, Kevin," but I think his character is sort of redeemed because they flip the script when they go to see the psychic in the dirt
Yeah.
mall, where TS is the one who ends up being really appreciative of her. He's so into what she's saying that he doesn't even quote unquote see the third nipple. And Brodie is completely, disgusted until the opportunity to hook up presents itself, and he's yanked away by Quint. I don't know what that would have been about, but yeah, it's a very strange film. I want to talk a bit about Ben Affleck and the famous uncomfortable place scene.
Shannon Hamilton.
Which, is this another bit of cuteness on Kevin Smith's part if we have to, again, get into his head? Because Shannon Hamilton is trying to put the moves on Brenda, Brodie's ex. Not Brenda, sorry. Why can't I think of her name?
Renee.
Yes, she gets called Brenda. This is the whole
Yes.
this is the whole bit of 90210-ception that I'm going for. Brenda was Shannon Doherty's character on Beverly Hills 90210. That she was recently off of that show and kind of trying to get into the movies and things like that. But you've got a character named Shannon who is trying to go out with Renee. Now Renee's played by an actress named Shannon.
Mhm.
Was this another in joke? Because there were times, I think, especially the first time I watched, I was very confused. Like, wait, his name is Shannon, but the actress is what?
Yeah.
Well, possibly because she was married to George Hamilton's son for a brief minute.
Oh my gosh, really?
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know if that was one of the things that she maybe is like, hey, if you can name this character Shannon Hamilton, there's that. They may have been engaged at the time. I can find out very quickly.
Well, I will just say, like, there's a character in the movie who, again, she's a 15-year-old high school student who is writing a book, a sex book, and she's doing research. It's called Borgasm, the plight of the 1990s male or something like that. And she's got all these subjects that she has sex with, and she documents the experiences. And then on her calendar, she's got little like smiley faces and grass and, X's and things representing, different acts and reactions to acts. And Shannon Hamilton is the manager of Fashionable Male who goes around beating people up and threatening people. And he's a big jerk. And somehow Renee can't quite see any of this because he's putting on the charm for her. But at the end, it turns out he had sex in a very uncomfortable place, as they say, with this young teenager, and they show the tape at the end. And what's shocking is what's going on in the tape, but also what's being said, because Shannon is saying, "Who's your favorite new kid?" "Yeah, call me Joey." And then he says, he ends it with, before they cut off, he says, "Please don't go, girl."
Please don't go, girl. All right. Yeah.
As a legit, unabashed fan of New Kids on the Block back in the day, I was fascinated and mortified by this scene. How about y'all? And tell me, how big a fan of New Kids were you? I'm not the only one, right?
New Kids on the Block. Was that the that show from Canada where they did? No, wait, never mind.
That's the Kids in the Hall, Mike.
That's the Kids in the Hall.
I know what you're doing, and I don't appreciate it.
Trying to confuse everyone, just so everyone can get in my mindset. But yeah, I mean, it's funny that they were showing like a porno tape to a whole wide audience, and the fact that when they're doing the whole dating game, you have Brodie who's just basically yelling profanity and like insulting everyone, and the audience is just eating it up and loving it. I love the fact that they're like filming like a television show pilot in a shopping mall, and like the producers don't even have seats; they're just like sitting on the marble concourse to watch the show. So some of that stuff I kind of liked, like with the dating show. But yeah, when I saw that tape, it was pretty fun to see like Shannon actually, go to prison for that, and the whole wrap up was pretty funny.
There was one of the things I think was very clever, and again, I'm just assuming this based on what I saw, but when Shannon Hamilton is being led off in handcuffs by the police, and Brodie gets to punch him in the stomach. The one cop's like,
Yeah.
"You can't punch
yeah.
someone who's in custody." He's like, "Come on." He's like, "Okay, just this once."
Yeah.
Ben Affleck's reaction to getting punched is almost frame for frame Lee Harvey Oswald getting shot by Jack Ruby in that garage.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild.
The one weird thing I noticed in the opening credits, when they like show Ben Affleck's name, there's a comic strip of Batman on there, and it's just kind of like a way where they sort of predict the future.
Well, yeah, he was. His comic was called Buttman Adventures.
Buttman Adventures, yeah. But it was Batman.
And I want to talk really quick about, I know I'm jumping all around here, but the opening of this movie, I love the comic book opening because it sort of like sets the theme for what we're going to see in the rest of the movie. But you've got all these great comic book covers by 90s comic book artist superstars like J. Scott Campbell and Jay Lee and Ethan Van Sciver, caricatures of the stars of the movie in various comics that were out at the time, and they're all tied into who they're playing in the movie. Like Joy Lauren Adams plays the kind of the best girlfriend to TS and Brodie. Her name is Gwen, so she's in a comic called Gwen 13. Mm-hmm. The teenage girl, she's on a cover of Weapon Sex, which is a play on the Weapon X from Wolverine. Very clever. But I also love the opening song, Social by Squirt Gun. I don't know anything else about Squirt Gun except for this song, but it is, again, one of the best rockinest, get you in the mood for the movie you're about to watch opening sequences I've ever seen. I just wish that the following 89 minutes was as good as the opening.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it does go from, that high energy song to then TS with Brandy, and you find out a girl like had an embolism in a pool, and then the whole sequence with Brodie and Renee, which is like so slow but also kind of funny and whatnot. But I understand what you're saying. I think it would have been better if there's been something going on, maybe even like a little bit of like a scene with Brandy and her dad prior to him, like, dancing in his towel and doing all this stuff, like him being like, you need to dump him, and like, this is what he did, and then showing the girl doing like laps in the pool, and then and also it was very weird that TS's reaction to that girl when she died was way more believable and more of a reaction than Brandy telling him. But I think that's more also with the thing with the dialogue. Like, there are certain scenes with Shannon Doherty where I'm believing what she's saying. I understand it's a lot, but there's also things that it's like, you just read that off the page. And it's like, so, especially like in the elevator, I just didn't believe it when she's in a fight with Brodie. It's like, this seems very fake to me. And like, you're reading a script. And then other scenes though were not, but it's a lot of dialogue. And I also noticed it a lot with Jeremy London too, that he was like, so which like kind of reminded me of like that 1930s sort of like, hey, gotta get this and this, which when it works, but I've also seen that in Greta Gerwig films too, where it's like this not repetitive dialogue, but so much dialogue. And then, but it's like, you guys are talking way too much and I'm not believing a damn thing you're saying. I understand you can memorize the lines, but you need to make me believe that these are coming directly from you and not off a page.
Yeah. I think the key there is the quantity and the quality of the speech, because it's very much Kevin Smith trying to do a His Girl Friday thing where you've got this very rapid fire banter between two people, but they're not big complicated speeches. It's very quick, kind of pithy back and forth. Whereas this one, and I know exactly what you're saying, Katie, because I was going to bring this up, that the argument in the elevator where Brodie and Renee are fighting, and she's listing off the reasons that she dumped him before she jumps him. She says, and I don't have the whole thing memorized, but she's like, and do you think I really care about when two rival comic book labels have a major crossover with competing characters and variant two different editions of varying chromium covers? I'm like, yeah, I can see Kevin Smith being a comic book geek, knowing about all of that and putting it into a script. I don't buy that the Renee character would refer to things in those terms. She's like, I don't give a shit about your comic books. That's about the extent of how that bit of dialogue would realistically go, but it's being written from it's the dream dialogue of a comic book geek. And I think the difference between that and, say, Tarantino's dialogue, particularly in Reservoir Dogs from a few years earlier, is the opening scene where they're talking about Madonna, and you've got Tarantino, who wrote all this dialogue, delivering this dialogue as the Mr. Brown character. You believe it because he's talking very conversationally. There are other people who are jumping in and out of it instead of just a straight monologue, kind of like what I'm doing right now. Sorry. But it feels more like conversation rather than, hey, look how clever I am. I'm going to get a huge Hollywood actress to say my words.
Yeah. Here's my beat. Here's your beat. Here's my beat. Here's your beat. And it is interesting when you talk about the comic book fight and what the details that you're describing, that possibly your significant other would not do that, because his significant other at the time, Kevin Smith, was Joy Lauren Adams, who was in several of his movies. And I wonder if they ever had that fight. But I could also see her being that specific, especially with someone who goes on and on about these specifics regarding comics. I could see her, if she was going to have some sort of argument regarding the redundancy of, a DC and Marvel, and, the different, how, they could be so similar, but yet no one wants to bring out these similarities and stuff like that. I could see I could see that specific person like having that argument and really, really going into detail about it. But I can understand I don't think Renee would do that. I think Renee would have been like, I don't want to hear about your comics. I don't want to hear about, all that stuff. You don't even let me, it's like, well, it's not my fault. My mom doesn't like you. It's like, your mom doesn't even know me. We've never been introduced.
And
like,
that's,
you guys are in your 20s. Like, what?
Well, that's the thing that I think is the key. That's the relatable, that's the most believable bit of dialogue that these characters share, is the whole idea of, in that elevator, when Renee says, she's talking about Shannon Hamilton, she's like, he's already introduced me to his mother. And that's like the showstopper. That's all you need. The thing about the comic books and the specifics of that bug me is, maybe in 2025, when comic book culture has been ubiquitous for 2 decades and people are kind of more immersed in that, especially with the internet and just like the conversations swirling around the kind of the ether about it. But you're talking about 1995, where comic book geeks cared about and knew about comics. I'm speaking from experience, but anyone who is not in that culture, I feel like, unless Brodie was talking specifically about what a Chromium cover was every day for like, a year, it probably would have just been like Charlie Brown's teacher. Like, oh, he's talking about comics again. I don't know what this is. I don't care. I don't understand. He's not listening to me. And so I'm going to block him out. That's the only counter I would have to that. But again, but I also feel like if Kevin Smith had a girlfriend like this, and this is related from personal experience, she would have been more into that subculture and not necessarily thrown that back at him, because she would have cared if there was 2 major comic book labels competing with varying Chromium covers, So I don't know.
I mean, that's the problem with a lot of his dialogue. They try, it feels like it's trying to constantly deliver a joke, and he's also just talking about his own personal interest, in the form of a character, like you said, who wouldn't do it. That's sort of what bored me with this movie, is that it has the Clerks dialogue, but it's not believable. When you're watching Clerks, you actually believe these characters and why they would say, these things. Here, it's just kind of all over the place, and they needed some major refinements in that script before they started filming, because I feel like Universal kind of rushed him to get this movie out the door.
That's possible. I think the other difference with Clerks is that, these 2 movies have very different paces. Clerks is the whole point of it is we have to spend 8 hours of a workday in a boring convenience store and a boring video store. So there's nothing to do but talk to each other. In this movie, there's so much plot going on that there's so many scenes and so many cuts that you have to get this dialogue out. and it's in the midst of, okay, now we've got this guy flying through the air and crashing through a wall again. Now we got the pretzel thing. We've got the flea market and the arrest and Stan Lee and all this other stuff going on.
I think beating up Easter Bunny for no apparent reason other
why
than
did the kids help beat him up?
Maybe he didn't want to like look dumb in front of Jay and Silent Bob and let him know that Shannon Hamilton beat him up. I wasn't really sure why he blamed it on the Easter Bunny and just not immediately on Shannon Hamilton.
Again, that's another thing. I've seen this movie a lot, and I that never made sense to me. I thought, well, maybe since I'm really paying attention to it to be able to talk at a podcast, I'll pick up on some detail I missed. No, I think it's just sloppy. Go ahead, Mike.
No, the thing is, like, Kevin Smith kind of did what he tried to do with this movie in Clerks 2, but he did it better because it had sort of like those rambling scenes, but they were believable. Like, there's that great scene where they're comparing the Lord of the Rings to Star Wars, and at the end he says, like, Sam bricks in Frodo's mouth and it causes the guy to vomit on the spot. Like, that's kind of funny. It's like it has like a little slapstick, but it's inserted at the end, kind of like the Donkey Show. They sort of like build up to it and then they insert that in the end, and that's where the slapstick humor works. Here Kevin Smith's like, oh, I don't know what to do, just put in like a Batman reference when they get the grapple hook and go up the building. Just do that. I don't know.
I kind of got that from 1989's Batman. And it's like when I saw that, especially like Silent Bob being Michael Keaton and Jay being Kim Basinger, and the way it's like that to me threw me back to that. And it's like, the nostalgia going back, even though that would have been just like 5-6 years from that. That's just my thought on it.
No, and also I didn't put this together, but Jay kind of had Kim Basinger's long blonde flowing hair.
Yeah.
But no, Mike, to your point, like Mallrats is kind of all Donkey Show, and no breathing room. I happen to think that Clerks 2, unironically, is one of the best sequels ever made.
Wow.
And I think it ends on a beautiful note again with great music. I think it opens with a spectacular song, Nothing But Flowers by the Talking Heads, and ends with the Alanis Morissette song. It's stirring and it's moving, and that's another reason why I never thought there needed to be a Clerks 3, but then it's Clerks 3 opens with the Alien 3 ending, where you take two beloved characters from the previous movie and all of a sudden they're just dead off screen, and I'm supposed to accept that and move on and enjoy the comedy. I'm like, no.
That was my problem with it. It was depressing, Clerks 3. Especially, I don't want to spoil it, but the whole movie's sort of about like failure and loss and then being able to embrace that. And maybe I have it wrong. I haven't seen it in years. I saw it once on a screener, and I just thought this is unnecessary and depressing.
Yeah, and I think Clerks and Clerks 2 are also kind of depressing in their own way, but the characters eventually find out a way to triumph. And I think that's one of the best things Kevin Smith ever did, was to change the ending of the first Clerks, because you have this great comedy, and then there's an epilogue where Dante's closing up the store. Do you guys know about this, right?
No.
Oh my gosh, you don't know about the original ending of Clerks 1?
I don't think so.
Does it end like Rambo? The original ending?
I don't know the original. I don't know the original ending to Rambo, but very possibly. So let me just get through this. Dante closes up the store, much like the end of the first movie, when I think Randall comes in, throws the towel at him, and says, "We're closed." There's a cut to Dante at the cash register. The lights are out. The last customer comes in, and Dante says, "We're closed," and the guy pulls out a gun, shoots Dante dead, and then takes all the cash out of the register and leaves. And that's how Clerks originally ended.
I actually kind of remember that now.
No, I have never heard of that ending.
I remember hearing about that I think it was a DVD extra, because I still have like the thick DVD, and I think they show that. And I thought it was a joke when I saw it. I was like, oh, that's not the real ending. But
wow, that is very French New Wave of him before French New Wave even came out. It's like, damn. Woo!
And that's the thing. It's not played for laughs. And I think the justification is earlier in the film. It's very clever, but I think it's Kevin Smith or whoever was advising him said, in this case, your cleverness is going to destroy your film. Because early on, when they're talking about Star Wars, as he is wont to do, he said, Dante says, that's all life is, a series of down endings. All Jedi had was a bunch of Muppets, talking about why Empire was superior. So this is going to be Kevin Smith's dark Empire Strikes Back ending to his wacky sex dialogue comedy, and it didn't work. It's shocking.
Well,
it's not played for laughs at all.
mean,
it's very
that's,
sad.
That's so ahead of its time. Like now, I think that totally would have worked, especially with the whole mantra that he keeps saying, like, I'm not even supposed to be here today and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then with the whole, I'm not even supposed to be there today, and then he gets shot and killed. It's like, holy shit. Yeah, that is a totally different film. Yeah. Wow. No, I have never, and I've been to things that I've never, why? Well, thank you. I feel like I learned, if anything, I learned something very new today. This I feel like the rainbow, the more you know me. It's a very special kicking the seat with Ian Simmons.
It would have been funny if after he got shot, he said, I'm not supposed to be here today. And then,
yeah, the more you know. Yeah.
Yeah, now I just got inspired, Katie. I want to do a Jay and Silent Bob PSA called "The More You Smoke."
Oh.
But anyhow, all right. Let's or one to grow on. That kind of gives a new meaning, like a
there
little
you go.
Yeah, but let's bring it back to Mallrats as we close out, because we're about the end of our time here. Any kind of final thoughts on the movie? I'll kind of lead off by saying I have a special place in my heart for it because it is, Kevin Smith. Before I didn't like a lot of his movies. I had a misplaced admiration for Brodie, his brashness. He does have some of the funnier lines in the movie, like "I'm all man, lady." It's just fun. He's like kind of an avatar for my id. But I also realize it's not very well written. It's very overly written. It looks cheap. And for the 15 minutes of, I think, truly inspired material in the movie, there's an hour and 15 minutes of stuff that is most certainly not. So, Katie, what are your final thoughts on Mallrats?
For the negatives that it has, I think some of the positives are, I love the assertiveness and the strong female characters that it has that are very sex positive, that, it is in their control. They're not being taken advantage of. Although even when they talk about Shannon Hamilton, Gwen says, like, yeah, he tried to do something with me that's very uncomfortable, like, do that. But she said no and stuff like that. And, with Trisha, although she is a child, and that is, it's like, she is taking an advance. Her parents know exactly what she's doing.
Sorry. That's the one thing I'm like, no.
Yeah, no. I know. It's like, and then she goes on to have 72 weeks on the bestseller, and they're making it into a movie. She is a child, yet she is, she talks like when she talks about, like, I videotape every single one of these interactions, and guys are like, what? It's like, it is consensual. I have them sign forms. I'm like, these are things that then, later on happen to people where it didn't. And it's like, to see this in 95, where someone is taking control of that and like being like, this is consensual act. Like, it's all that, even though it is a child. I know.
That's the thing is, she doesn't, like, legally, she cannot consent to that. Even though it is her idea. And also, I don't know if you picked up on this, but at the end in the book signing scene where they have the Fast Times at Ridgemont High kind of montage of where are they now, she signed the books. And did you notice her personal security guard is LaFours, and he plants this loving kiss on her head. I'm like, oh boy, howdy, because he's at least like 3 times her age.
Oh yeah. Well, and I thought it was interesting too when Ben Affleck, it's like, what are you talking about? I thought she was 36. And it's like, where did you get that number 1?
Yeah.
And it's like, what is happening here?
That is a young 36, if that's a 36. But I mean, look,
I mean, Renee and Brodie have sex in the most gigantic elevator in a mall ever.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things, like, for the 90s, and you know, this is pre-Miramax and all that stuff. I do like the fact that this is, you know, these women are, it's sex positive. It's not like making them out to be like negative in any way. And that, I think, is very ahead of its time in the 90s. And Kevin Smith has usually tried to do that in, you know, the majority of his films, you know,
going all the way back to Clerks,
after this. Yeah. So, I mean, I always like that. I always like to see Michael Rooker, the guy who plays LaFours. He has been a stunt double for Arnold Schwarzenegger. So it's nice to see him in a movie that doesn't have anything to Schwarzenegger. It's one of those movies that, yes, critics hated it at the time, and I can understand why. I remember when I watched it at the time, I didn't like it. It does have more nostalgia now, probably just with the mall culture. But, you know, I'm a fan of it. I'm glad I have my VHS and got to take pictures with Shannon Doherty with it. So those are things that I will always cherish.
Yeah. Excellent. All right, Mike, bring us home.
Well, I wish I could share Katie's enthusiasm, but unfortunately, I just remember when I saw it originally, I didn't react at all. And I thought, well, maybe it's just because I was tuning in and I didn't really watch it straight through. Because I did watch it straight through once and, you know, didn't leave an impression on me. I watched it straight through this time. And yeah, I just kept listing the ways where this movie didn't work, whether it's outdated jokes, you know, off timing with humor, you know, conflicting genres, unlikable characters. You know, like the one scene I like is with a younger bearded Stan Lee, and yeah, Stan Lee looks all right in that beard, and yeah, and yeah, I was surprised. You know, it's I can see why he sports the sunglasses. It kind of works for his style.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's a movie that you watch where it's an interesting historical piece to see sort of like what 90s comedies were like back then. And it's also a movie where you can kind of see where Kevin Smith was sort of learning how to handle larger budgets, how to handle, you know, multiple like kind of categories at the same time when he's trying to make it like slapsticky, but he's also trying to make it, you know, a lot of like back and forth dialogue. If Aaron Sorkin happened to just write toilet jokes instead of, you know, like political commentary. Yeah, so it's an interesting piece of history, but I wouldn't recommend it because I was actually going down my research and there's a great quote from Gene Siskel where he said, I just sat there stone-faced the whole time and couldn't believe this was the same director of Clerks. And I have to agree with that. I think Clerks worked because it was just like one camera just capturing everyone's dialogue. When you switch that to like two cameras and they don't really know how to edit it, it's just like, all right, line delivery, pause. Why are we pausing? Oh, okay, now we're next to the next character, line delivery. And yeah, this was Kevin Smith learning how to be a filmmaker, doing more than just the bare minimum. So not great, but, you know, interesting to see.
And also, I don't remember which film it was, but it was years later. It might have been Zach and Miri, but he was on a late night talk show, and he said, basically, I made this movie as an apology for Mallrats.
Yeah. Although Chasing Amy is pretty damn good too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be another one to revisit in a couple of years.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thanks for hanging out and talking Mallrats. I love this kind of wide range of perspectives, taking off the rose tinted glasses of nostalgia. Yes, there's the VHS, which I owned and I got rid of at some point. That's the hazards of physical media and upgrading things. Oh, there it is.
Wow. Look at that.
But so I will say next week, we're going to close out Class of 95. We're going to graduate with a film that I don't know how many people have seen it. People, I think, know it more from the memes than for the actual film itself. It is a movie that notoriously, the soundtrack for this movie outgrossed the box office for this movie. We are talking about Empire Records from 1995, a film that I happen to love through and through. but it is also one of the cringiest things you will ever subject yourself to. If you have already seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, you are forewarned. So yeah, join us back here next Sunday. Time to be determined. And yeah, again, I'm Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Mike Crowley of YPA Reviews, Katie Glidewell, the blonde in front herself. And yeah, this has been Class of 95. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, and all that stuff. Ring the bell for notifications. Be sure and check out all of Earth's Mightiest Critics. All their information is down below. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much. Take care and snoochie boochies, as they say.
Snoochie boochies.
Snoochie boo.